Welcome to the University of Arizona Special Collections. My name is Bob Diaz, and I'm the curator for the Performing Arts and the coordinator of exhibits and events. I want to tell you a little bit about the exhibit and then turn the mic over to Maribel Alvarez, who's going to introduce the speakers. Special Collections is home to the archives of Tucson Meet Yourself. We have material going back to the beginning up until 1993-94. And so my task was to pull material from that huge archive and put it in the cases that you saw earlier. We have about 10 years worth of materials in the middle cases, and then it jumps to the last few years. And then I added posters and T-shirts and photographs and all kinds of stuff. But it's just a smattering of what we have. I urge you and encourage you to come to visit Special Collections and look at the archives. We're open 9 to 5 Monday through Fridays, and we're open to the public. And you just come in and get assistance at the desk there. We'd be happy to show you other materials. This is just, as I said, a smattering of what we are very fortunate to have. And it's been a real honor and a real pleasure to do this work. Jim and Loma and the folks at Tucson Meet Yourself are absolutely wonderful. And I had to do my best, and I hope you enjoy the exhibit. It's the 40th anniversary of Tucson Meet Yourself. I also happen to be a member of the board of directors, so I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Tucson Meet Yourself. And we have a stellar cast of folks who have helped out through the years. And so I'm going to turn this over to Maribel and have her work the floor, so to speak, and introduce our speakers. Maribel?
Thank you so much, Bob. Welcome, everybody. Wow, what a wonderful gathering. Hello, everybody. Bienvenidos. Making a grand entrance there, the president of our board of directors, Cindy Watson. Bob, like he said, a member of the board. Other board members, would you please stand up? Board members who are present. Back there. Bob Schatz here. Lydia.
I haven't time to be bored yet.
Jim, you have had every single rolling hat that's possibly could be worn. We're so delighted. I'm Maribel Alvarez. I'm a professor here at the university. I'm with the Southwest Center and the School of Anthropology. Some of you know me as the short Big Jim. I have the job that for so long the university has made a space for folklore since 1943. Folklore has been collected, and there's been groups, associations. 1974, the biggest of all the efforts came up, which was to form a festival. So many stories, so many things happening. We will have a magazine that will tell some of those stories in a written format, and you will please make sure that you sign, because if you're not on our mailing list, there will be a special invitation for a special reception where we will issue that magazine and celebrate the festival again, closer to it in October. I want to thank everybody. There's folk artists here. There are people who have done amazing jobs for years that very much maintain the festival alive. I was reading something recently that was saying from a folklorist in Washington, D.C., writing that a festival that lasts 40 years is actually an anomaly. It's not very common, and the reason they were explaining is because it's so labor intensive, and people burn out. And it takes a lot of effort, and the cost always keeps going up, because the more successful you are, the more people want to come, and the more people want to come, the more amenities you have to have. So it's very common for some of the most successful long-term festivals to actually eventually, say, hey, we cannot do it anymore. So 40 years is not a small feat at all in the national picture of what a Folklife event is in any way. We have one of the best in the country. It is recognized as such. We now get funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. We are really admire and love, and of course we know that the main reason for that is because of the sustainability that for years Jim has given to the event. So No, I will. I can. You know me. I could talk forever, but I want to thank everybody who's here, from the staff, the current staff of Tucson Meet Yourself, putting it together. Anybody who's on the staff, would you please raise your hand now? Yes. We have.
How about people who have been on the
Anybody who has been on the staff before, Tucson Meet Yourself staffers from the past. Thank you. Passing the baton. Well, anyway, you're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to Jim and his friends and all the amazing, wonderful people who have given so much of their love. And without you, we wouldn't be here today. And if you all keep the love, I think we can keep doing it for another 40 years. Do you think? So there will be a reception. There will be a reception after the panel. So hang around, look at the exhibit. And that's right, Bob, huh? Yeah. And again, Jim, es todo suyo. El espacio, la noche, la guitarra.
Unaccustomed as I am to bellowing through a microscope. Is this thing working, or is this better? This one better? Do either of them work? Okay. We could always turn this off, too. Well, Tucson Meet Yourself was a crazy idea that a few of us had, and the basic premise was that there are all sorts of communities within Tucson, ethnic communities, occupational communities, religious communities, who are creating their own kinds of traditional beauty for their own purposes. And some of these are available to the public, but quite often at a little cost of going on to unfamiliar turf. Everyone is welcome at, for instance, the Yaqui Easter ceremony. Everyone is welcome in many other places, but it takes a certain oomph to force yourself to place yourself in an uncomfortable place. So our idea was to assemble as much of this beauty together and put it on neutral turf where nobody felt so much at home, where they could make it hard for other people to enjoy, and where nobody felt really uncomfortable, and let her all rip. And very early on, at the suggestion perhaps of the third member of the early group, Mary Souls, who's not here tonight, we included food. And of course, if your definitions of beauty don't include food, I'm not going to go around riding the grub trail to your house. And food is the traditional art form that thrives longest, except for certain ways of talking, that thrives longest in communities and families. So we found a champion in Father Charles Pulcher, the late Father Pulcher, who was a member of a group called the Cultural Exchange Council of Tucson, or who knew people there. And we went to the Cultural Exchange Council and said we'd like to put on a festival, and they, not really being sure what they were getting into, said yes. And we did it. By about Wednesday before the festival started, I thought I knew what the program was going to be. And I thought I knew who was going to sell food there. And all of a sudden I realized I didn't have anyone to work on the festival, do all the kinds of things that needed to be done. So what can a person do in that case but to call on your friends? And that's what we did. And I think that comes maybe to something that Loma said very eloquently in the car coming over. Loma, would you like to be eloquent on a chair?
It sounds so much more eloquent when you say it. The first years of the festival, and on through to this day, that park is a community of family, of friends. We are all tied together so many different ways. When we started, our kids were in elementary school, and after we'd done this for a couple of years, my mom came to see the festival, and she looked around at a given point. She'd grown up in big, tough cities. She looked around and she said, I don't see the little one. Where is he? Gee. Well, I said, don't worry about it. You know, he'll be okay. He's in the park. He knows he shouldn't leave the park. And she didn't understand this, but at that point, everybody in that park knew everybody else through one or two connections. It was heavily university, but not all. And it was heavily groups of people who knew Jim from other things he had done. He has the habit of saying that if he hadn't been in a play called Diamond Studs, he would never have been able to do the things in the community that he did, that this gave him credibility, but he had credibility for being parts of lots of different communities. And pulling all of these different communities into the park and letting people, just letting it happen, letting friendships and networks happen, has been an amazing part of Tucson Meet Yourself that I never imagined. I didn't know what I was getting into.
People would come volunteered for the festival. We'd have a volunteer meeting, and usually 15 or 20 people would show up for the volunteer introduction meeting. Does this have to be turned on every time? No. Is it working? Okay. And none of the people we expected to see would show up. And then the day of the festival, they'd all be there. And we would say, well, where were you at the meeting? Who needs a meeting? You know we were coming. We knew we were coming. We know what needs to be done. Let's do it. And that's really the spirit of the festival. And one of the wonderful things about the festival that there never really was a hierarchy of management and labor. We all just put on a festival. And it's produced some really great stories. And most of you have heard every Tucson Meet Yourself story that I have to tell. I'll tell you one of my favorites, and then I'm going to call on Richard. For quite a few years, the festival would start Friday evening, and about 4 or 5 o'clock Friday afternoon, things were starting to get interesting. The food were pretty much set up. People were coming to the park, and 2 street people would show up. Same 2 every time. Tall, skinny, Indian-looking guy, and a little short, blonde, Southern guy. And all of a sudden, I'd look beside me, and there they'd be. And the little guy would always sidle up to me and say, Jim, have you ever noticed that wherever there's a big crowd, a whole lot of people always shows up. And at that moment, I knew that the festival was happening. I haven't seen them for many years. I hope they're either in comfort or in glory. And but those things, those little things. Richard's participation was many things. He was an advisor to me. He gave me a lot of advice on working with different groups of people, because Richard had been brought up as a Mexicano around Atam and Yaquis and knew lots of different etiquettes and ways to behave that I didn't necessarily know. But Richard also worked in the Blessed Kateri food booth, which mostly served fry bread. And there were a couple of wonderful, wonderful incidents, both of which I think happened on a Sunday morning when everyone had been working for 2 days straight. Everybody was exhausted and a little strange. And Richard?
I think I should pass this to my friend here next to us, because I didn't join Tucson Meet Yourself till the second year, and I'll tell you how I got to join it. But he was an original. You want to talk about?
Well, it depends on what you mean by original. I didn't arrive in Tucson until 1976, which was the third year that the festival was there. I arrived here for a job on campus, and so that was August, and a couple of months later I went to this festival because I had met Jim as a banjo player and heard that he did this thing downtown. And I showed up expecting a festival of the type that I'd gotten used to back in Ohio and on the East Coast. And it became very clear that that was not what I was experiencing. And so I came back the next day not carrying instruments, not expecting to be in jam sessions, not expecting to play, but expecting to empty trash and to carry things around the festival. We did that. I did that for a few years, and then 1 year, and then those were the days when Jim and Loma were the festival, beginning to end. They did all of the planning, all of the setup, all of the fundraising, all of the calling, everything was organized by those two people. Well, the festival was a success, just in case you didn't notice, and it started getting bigger, and about my third year here, it was absolutely clear, having gone to the festival and shown up just to work, that Jim and Loma were pretty much overwhelmed by the job that they had created for themselves. And so a few people, Gary Tennant and I, and a couple of other people, were sitting around the party after the festival at Jim's house saying, we're not going to let this happen again. We're just going to insert ourselves into the festival year-round, whether he likes it or not. And these were the days, Jim just hit upon it, these were the days, right now, you know, Jim's been talking, and he's been a part of this community, and people have listened to what he's said all these years, so we know what the festival's about. We know his vision for it. But at that time, the person who knew the vision for the festival was Jim, and Loma, who had to listen to it probably a lot. The rest of us had to learn. And Jim was, I think, a little afraid that that people, that's why that we were getting involved. So we spent some time learning his vision and understanding that, and we spent a few years just simply showing up and saying, we're having a meeting every 2 weeks about Tucson Meet Yourself. Since you're running it, you should probably be there. And that's how the original group of people who were the staff formed. Nothing formal. And that's the way the festival grew for a very long while. It was very organic. That there were things like 1 year we were sitting around at the festival, and there had been a fellow who had shown up the last couple of years and helped with the trash and did the heavy lifting. In those days, we used to carry pianos around the city on the back of pickup trucks and all kinds of weird things. And this fellow seemed very organized and very good, and we were sitting around afterward and said, you know what we should do? We should find out the last name of that guy Nash. And sure enough, we found out his name. He joined the group, and he was an important part for a long while. It grew that way. It was an organic thing. And Richard has a lot of stories. He joined late, but he was there from the very beginning. In that meeting, in that party where Gary and I were deciding we were going to inflict ourselves upon the Griffiths, it was Richard that was listening in, and he went to Jim and said, there are two people going to come up and tell you something, and you should listen. So.
You want to talk?
Tell the story I asked for, Richard.
I didn't join Tucson Meet Yourself, and I didn't know Jim at the first, when he had his first Tucson Meet Yourself. But at our school, my wife and I, we put on what we call a spring fair. And I had all the Yakis and all the TOs that was around us joined us because each class needed money. And my wife is one of these ladies that know how to raise money by selling food. So we put on this festival. And I invited Denny Lopez and his Desert Indian Dancers because he was just starting out with the Desert Indian Dancers. And there was a guy there from the National Festival Society, or whatever the name is. His name was Richard Spotwoods. Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, and I didn't know Jim. I didn't know him, but we threw this big fiesta over at the school. So Dick Spotwood is there, and he says, I want you to meet somebody. And I said, okay, I was the MC. I said, okay. So I went and met Jim Griffith. And Dick Spotwood was the one that introduced me to Jim Griffith. The guy from what's the name of that?
National Folk Festival
Yeah,
Association.
National Folk Festival from Washington. He came there to see what we were putting on, and he was very interested in the Desert Indian Dancers. And as you know, Denny Lopez, really got his group going. But we had Yakis, we had a whole bunch of TOs, and all the Mexicanos showed up, and they were selling champurros, and and we raised money for each class. But then we got together, and we said, we do not have a black booth. So I started asking a lot of our friends about the black booth. And they sent me down to this Baptist church down on South 6. And I got to tell you the story because it's very interesting. So they had a meeting on Saturday morning, and Carmen and I went to the meeting. And I presented what we wanted. I said, look, we throw this nice school festival, but there's no blacks. We do not have black people. So we went to this black church, and I presented what I wanted. So the minister started talking. What's the minister's name?
I don't remember.
Well, he joined us. He joined Tucson Meet Yourself, and he gave a lot of blessings, that minister. Well, anyway, when I started talking, and the black people, and one would get up and he would holler, "Bless the Lord!" And I would keep talking, praise God. This really, I'm not used to this, but we ended up with a black booth. And I told them, look, you cannot sell high priced, Whatever you're going to sell, keep it at low price because the kids wants to buy your food. And the following day, we went to one of the villages in the TO reservation, and we presented the same thing, but we wanted more participations of TOs. And it was so reserved, I only got 3 questions, and they would raise their hand, and very respectable ask me, what do I have to bring or that sort of thing. And what a difference. But that got the black people into Tucson Meet Yourself. That church group began to sell chicken, fried chicken or whatever it is in Tucson Meet Yourself. Barbecued chicken, And that gave an entrance to these people. But we did not have no black people, but we finally got black people to participate with us. And of course, there's a lot of stories that I don't want to talk about it, but
Richard,
very interesting story.
tell one story for me. The story about the lady who came by and was explaining to her friends what you guys were and what you guys did.
Oh, okay, well, this lady wanted to know how you eat popovers. Very, very respectable lady, She wanted to know, well, how do you eat popovers?
Richard was very tired.
That was Sunday morning after 2 days of hard work.
Go ahead and tell her.
What did you tell her, Richard?
I said, well, the way you eat popovers is by your mouth.
Well, there you are. Can't argue with that.
One of the things that I think everybody gets is that there are some themes that get repeated over and over, both in everybody's telling and in the experiences of different people with the festival. And my personal recollection is that I attended the first festival and spontaneously volunteered picking up garbage and fell in love with my vision of it. And my role evolved thereafter. But one of the things that in the early days was hard for people to understand was that this was at core an academic endeavor, that there was a PhD who was studying traditions within the Southwest and wanted to have a place to showcase and to celebrate those traditions. And when Dan was talking about internalizing or understanding the vision that Jim had, and which we tended to condense into a celebration of the living traditional arts of Tucson and southern Arizona's folk and ethnic communities. People attending often had, or hearing about it, had difficulty distinguishing this festival from other festivals, and that it was both academic and that by talking about celebration, that it was also a way of having fun and making learning fun. Another thing that the people that Dan touched on that many people didn't understand was that this was a lot of work, that it was year-round effort to bring this one weekend off. And so what Jim and Loma started demanded more than two people could physically provide. And so the group that initially condensed around them became known as those of you who are as old as I am will recall that in China, around Mao Zedong, there was referred to as the Gang of Four. And so this initial planning group was referred to as the Gang of Five, regardless of how many people were involved in it at the particular time. And another theme that's involved here is that the festival wanted to create a safe, neutral, comfortable place for very disparate groups. Groups that had, in this community at various times, been segregated or prohibited from certain parts of the community. We wanted to have a place where everybody would feel safe and comfortable. That was one of the reasons that the downtown Presidio Park was chosen as the initial forum for it. And one of the themes of the festival that drew me in and that I fell in love with was the sense that for one weekend, all of these disparate communities would come together and would cooperate with each other, even though at various times they might have great animosities towards each other. And it was a vision of almost a utopic vision that was very captivating for me. And another one of the themes that was part of the festival from the inception was treating people with respect. Jim used to say that folklore, when you find a folk artist and you talk to them about their art, they say, "Oh, that old stuff." And it was important to respect artists for their art and to respect traditions and to respect communities. And so one of the ways that I became involved in planning and coordinating was that the number of communities within Tucson, as Tucson grew, expanded. And in the wake of the Indochina collapse, the U.S. in 1980 passed a refugee act and organized refugee resettlement. Tucson was one of the communities where refugees were resettled initially from Indochina and then from all over the world. And I became involved in 1980 in sponsoring a family from Laos. And this was a new community. The Laotian community in Tucson was a new community. And like so many communities before and after them, they felt somewhat isolated in the broader Tucson community. They had some traditions, and they weren't sure, how they would be accepted by the greater community. We came into contact with a lady who was trying to keep the young women and girls in the community involved in traditional dance. And so I went to the Gang of Five and introduced them to some of these people and said, this would be a nice tradition to incorporate into Tucson Meet Yourself. And as a result, the community felt respected and appreciated and part of the greater Tucson community.
And every now and then, people wanted to use the festival for their own purposes, political and social and religious. And Fred and Dan were our two negotiators, because my fuse is about that long. And Dan and Fred can listen to the same argument hundreds of times over without screaming or losing their tempers. And Dan has a story that I really like. The people who wanted to do the Peace March. Do you remember that one?
I'm not sure I remember that one.
Well, I'll tell it
Tell
on
the
you
story.
then.
I have two others.
Well, you tell a story on yourself, Dan.
Well, this isn't a story on myself. I was trying to think of things that I remember. I guess one of the reasons I don't remember the Peace March was because one of the things that we all noticed in the Gang of Five, that there would occasionally be a year where one of the people who had volunteered and worked very hard on the festival would happen that year to experience one or two things that made it sour to them. And they would often forget all the wonderful things that happened that weekend. And that happened to me, which is, I think, how Fred ended up there, because one year my long fuse got kind of short, and it was clear that I needed help, and so we got Fred to come out and do that. But and so I tried to put those things behind me for the most part, and I was trying to think of things that represented moments of the festival. We've hit on two of them. One is this exists because it's a community event. It's not only the community that is involved in the presentations, but also in the background. Families grew up at this festival. One of the people who was part of the year-round organization crowd for a while, well, two people, Rick Sonder and his wife Elsa ran the information booth for a number of years. And they'd started out before that was formal. They were just the people who would show up and set it up, and they brought their children. And I remember one particular volunteer meeting, and Rick had come, Rick and Elsa had come, and they were, of course, talking to people and arranging to get the booth manned so that they had a sign-up sheet. And their daughter, Jessie, was the only one of the kids that came, and Jessie was maybe 7 or 8 at the time. And as was her wont, she loved being with her parents, but not being close to them. And so she was sitting alone in a chair with her feet dangling and not paying attention as people entered. So most of the people in the room just saw this little girl sitting by herself there. And well, when the meeting started, the first thing Jim did is he asked everybody in the room to go around, introduce themselves, say who they were, had they been familiar with the festival, if they'd been there before, how many years had you been volunteering and those sorts of things. And went around the room, and it came to Jesse's turn, and Jesse got up and said, my name is Jesse Sonder, and I've been at the festival before. I volunteered for 5 years. And when the audience laughed, she couldn't understand, because it was an accurate count as far as she was concerned. And the other one was this thing about trying to make the festival enjoyable for everyone, to really make it fun. The Corrido Contest, which is a big part of the festival now, when that came about, Jim was looking to reach a wider community of musicians that did the corridos, and a sort of younger crowd. And he talked to Celestino Fernandez about putting together such a thing. And I don't remember where it was, but I remember we were eating. We were either lunch or breakfast somewhere, and the three of us were there, and we were talking about how we might do this. And we were thinking about how can you have a contest in which everybody's going to feel that's a good thing. Why, you don't want to have a competition in a community that isn't used to those things. So we were talking about it, and we came up with a solution which I think does illustrate what the festival is about. And I think it's still to this day. Instead of it being a corrido contest with a first prize, a second prize, a third prize, what it is, if it is a contest in which there are a myriad of prizes, each with its own name. There's a festival prize. There's the best traditional. There's everybody who won one of the contests was the best. And so that, and I think that's what helped that contest become what it is. It was this thing that you really weren't in a competition. You were just celebrating your community, your art, and you were happy when you were recognized for that with one of the plaques.
Jim, I've got to say something about that. About the Corrido Contest. It was a most unique contest in that you saw these people who were so honored to be there, who had written a corrido or were going to perform a traditional corrido, and they helped each other. Remember, Jim,
Oh, yes.
how they would, even though they were competing, so to speak, kind of, with each other, they would perform for each other, back up for each other.
Yes.
And that was, I mean, that was so telling of what Tucson Meet Yourself did. It brought out the best in us who were there and in the people who participated. I started out working at Tucson Meet Yourself as part of my divorce recovery. I basically was broke, and the kids would go away for the weekend. I had nothing. And so they let me pick up garbage. It was so exciting. I got to be a garbage person at Tucson Meet Yourself. It was wonderful. And then I got to meet Jim and Loma, which was even more exciting. And then one time I got to go to their house and eat for free. And when you're broke, that was really exciting. But the corrido, I could tell a lot, but I just had to tell that one.
Couple of things that we really should emphasize, and that is that Gloria and Debbie, who snuck out of this panel,
And let me hear.
finked out, were both library people, and the U of A library for a long time was an eager, enthusiastic, on most levels, sponsor of the festival. And a lot of people, the whole folk arts area at some points was staffed completely by library employees. And this outfit made a lot of Tucson Meet Yourself really work. Dan, however, told me after one festival, which he has apparently forgotten, that, and this to me says a lot about the festival and a lot about Dan and a lot about the way we try to work things. There was a group who wanted to do a peace march right through the middle of the festival at one of the high attendance times. Now, we tried to keep politics absolutely out of the festival. When you have Turks and Armenians in the same park, when you have lots of hot political issues held very strongly by different people in the same park, you just move away from those things. And so Dan talked with the representative of the march, and he talked to them for quite a while, and he talked to them very calmly. And he never said, no, you can't do that. He just explained very carefully and apparently very eloquently why we'd rather they didn't. And at the end of it, the organizer said, our attorney told us you'd to say no. And he told us that you'd say it so nicely that you had to go along with it. And damn it, he was right. Ever heard that story before?
Yes, I remember that.
Good.
Well, Jim taught me another trick that I used in watching out for the good of the festival. I mean, it was a downtown park, and that park during the day that's where a lot of people hang out that have no place else to go. And occasionally what would happen is someone who was used to that park being their own over the weekend would appear at the festival and sometimes cause a little bit of trouble, sometimes not, but very often it was not a difficult thing. But occasionally you would run into someone who had spent the afternoon drinking and had shown up to the festival thinking it was going to be that they could sleep in the park, and seeing all these people were panhandling or something like that, and I would be sent over to talk to them. And I'm pretty sure it was Jim that taught me the following trick, that I would take the inebriated person and bring them to one of the groups that sold bean burritos and treat them to as many of those as they could stomach. They were always very appreciative for the new food, and nothing like a whole lot of alcohol and a whole lot of starch to have its effect. And after a few minutes, they would go off someplace and sleep for the rest of the day. And that was a very effective way of not having a problem with somebody getting arrested or anything like that, but simply being nice to people. And that I learned at this festival, that people are basically very nice, and if you treat them with respect, they're going to do the right thing.
I'd like to talk to you about the respect that Jim showed these groups. First of all, when Jim wanted a norteño band, we would go to these bars down on the south side and listen to the music. Jim's trying to get a norteño band on the festival. So we would go to a bar there and sit there and listen to the music, and then he would talk to see if he could get one of these bands to come and play at Tucson Meet Yourself. And he was very, very good at that. We got a lot of groups out of these South Tucson to come and play at Tucson Meet Yourself. But I'd like to tell you the respect that Jim had for the Yaquis and the TOs. First of all, at that time, they weren't the Yaquis were not a tribe recognized by the United States.
Oh, yeah.
And Jim wanted to get the Yaquis to participate. And as you know, there's so respectable when you go to talk to these people. And I was brought up in this culture, and I said, Jim, this is what you got to do. And I said, you must show this respect to these people. You just can't go and say, I need you. You have to do certain things at certain times. And I said, the most important thing to seal the Yaquis to come and participate with you is tobacco. And I said, Jim, let's go talk to them, and we'll introduce you to the certain people that are in charge. And because they'll say yes, oh yeah, we'll participate. But that does not seal it. They will not show up. You must seal it with tobacco. And also getting the TOs, again, very respectable. You got to take your hat off. You got to present yourself as a gentleman, and very respectable. And I have to give a lot of credit to Jim. The respect that he shows for these two tribes, because I'm part of them. And I know the respect that each one of these men represents. And Jim really showed the respect that was required, and that's why the Yaquis and the TOs showed up.
Richard, can I have it back? Because I just got a little note, a respectful note, saying that we had 10 more minutes. and maybe some questions and answers, or at least some questions. Oh, I can't guarantee the answers, but if anyone has any questions, this would be the time to present them.
Give Norma one chance.
I spoke already. But we talk about respect, and by showing respect and having an ambiente, an environment in which people were respected, we received amazing gifts. We received the gift of not just necessary Fred, but useful Fred. And useful Fred had difficulty speaking, but useful Fred came every year to the festival for 20 years. The way Dan said, this is somebody who is a street person. He wasn't a street person. He lived near downtown, and he would show up for the festival, and he would pick up trash. He would keep an eye on things. He would help carry pianos. And if we were looking for something, if Fred could get moments of our attention, and we would tell him what we were looking for, he would be able to tell you over there, even though he couldn't talk, couldn't talk very well. But he was one of the great gifts of Tucson Meet Yourself. And the festival drew to itself, by its own being, wonderful, wonderful people like Claude, like Joe Murray, like so many people in this room who have worked so hard. Monica, Pat, Mary, everybody, every place I look, I see people who have worked hard on the festival and have brought to it their own gifts.
How do we get through?
And we've been lucky. Very, very
I think
lucky.
Loma bottom.
Questions to Jim?
Let me interject here for a second, please. Sorry. Hi. Maribel. We have some things to give away to folks who do something that Maribel is going to ask.
We're going to ask a quiz. Tucson Meet Yourself trivia. A few years ago, Tucson Meet Yourself, as you know, Tucson Meet Yourself has now grown and expanded. We have a lot of other programs and things. We have Border Lore. If you haven't liked us on Facebook, please do. Other 8,000 people do. If you want to subscribe to Border Lore, please sign on the website. We have a new website. We have lots of things. We have a field school, the last one of which was in Sonora, in Banamichi, full immersion over 7 days. We're doing a lot of other things other than the festival. And we are planning a lot of exciting things that will probably be the next iteration of the next 40 years, beginning with year 41. So be ready for that. One of the things we did a few years ago as part of the folklore program at the university, remember Jim used to do a TV show? Arizona Traditions, Southern Arizona Traditions. Well, there was a show, it lasted 3 minutes, but he did 153 of them. Ad lib. They were never edited. He had one camera and he'll go on location. He did 153 of those on the spot. I collected a few years ago 20 of them about food here, about mostly food. And they are Big Jim's Southern Arizona food traditions. So we're going to give one of those. We have 5 questions, and then you're going to get a Tucson Meet Yourself T-shirt. And these are ladies large. So if you don't wear it, you can give it to somebody. Okay, the first question is, how many name changes has Tucson Meet Yourself undergone in its history since the beginning? How many times has the name has changed?
None.
1, 2,
0.
Nope.
Tricky.
Monica, you have to help me. Monica's been our historian. She did most of the writing for the magazine that I announced to you. The first Tucson Meet Yourself was actually grammatically correct. It had a comma after Tucson, so it was called Tucson Meet Yourself. The second name was Tucson Meet Yourself and Friends. The third name is that period of the 5 years when it was called the Heritage Experience, when the name Tucson Meet Yourself was not used, and then Jim authorized the name back to the group, and that's Tucson Meet Yourself today. 4. So, okay, who said 3? You don't count? Oh, so I'm gonna have to come up with another question. Somebody said 3 back there. I think it was Dan back there. You said 3 or somebody? Make it up. Say, I said 3. There you go.
Very honest, Bud.
Somebody said 3. Okay, next question. Trivia. What is always the last act performed at the festival? Yes. Nope.
The round dance.
The-
Round dance.
Yes, the Tohono Autumn Round Dance. Jim has always had the last word of the festival be spoken in autumn. It's when it is done. Okay, good questions. We should do this more often. You guys want to come next week to the library and have another show? We'll have pizza and ice cream. When was the first Corrido Contest? When did it start? There's an exhibit out there, so you don't count, Bobby. When was the first Corrido Contest?
I had brown hair at the time.
Anybody wants to venture? Was it in the 90s? Was it in the 70s? May have been in the 80s, yes?
1980.
Nope. Close, warm, pretty warm. Come on, somebody read it. She was warm. She was pretty warm.
79.
Was that?
79.
82.
82. Woo! 82, it began. Along with that, what recent event in Tucson history was recently commemorated by a corridista who showed up unannounced at Tucson Meet Yourself Corrido Contest?
This one's easy.
Father Kino's anniversary of his death.
That was a good one, but that's not the most recent event that was commemorated at a Tucson Meet Yourself event. It was 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Somebody came, had never written a corrido before, and said, I'm here to sing a corrido for...
The big Jim hat song.
Nope. What?
Would it be the shooting?
Yes, Gabby Giffers. Yeah, the corrido. Yes. So the corridos are written, every year I ask Celestino, do you want to do it again? He says, we have to, because every year somebody writes a corrido about something that happens. And this year somebody wrote El Corrido de Tucson Meet Yourself. Mm-hmm. Did you have it there, Bob? Yes. Last...
I get a t-shirt for that.
You get a t-shirt.
A women's large.
Now, Tucson Meet Yourself has gone through a lot of changes, and as you know, it cost us about $300,000 to produce the festival now. That's many times over than it did in 74. But in 74, there was a business sponsor. There was a corporate sponsor. Who only one. Who was the business sponsor that was credited in the program in the first Tucson Meet Yourself? No hint? It's a local business in Tucson. Back there. What's that? No, not the bottling company.
McDonald's?
I would have said Valley Mac.
Nope.
Alfred.
No, they have something to do with music. Chicago store. The Chicago store is credited in the program as the business sponsor of the first Tucson Meet Yourself. Okay, I ran out of things, so we can do trivia, but I don't have any more giveaways. Thank you, Jim.
Any questions? Anyone?
Yes, we'll take a few more minutes for more questions, and I don't know if I can take this to the person. Can I do that? Who has a question?
I just had a comment. And I was going to piggyback on Loma because I was thinking about Fred during this presentation. Fred, who volunteered for so many years, and Fred was always got a shower, I think, at the hotel room that Jim and Loma took downtown, the Arizona Hotel or whatever it is, and he always got a new T-shirt. And he
A
all.
whole new set of clothes because Fred would take him out and get him new clothes.
Well, I didn't know that. So, just another comment about Fred because he was loved and a fixture.
Any other questions or comments?
Did it ever rain, and what did you do when it rained?
We worried a lot. Man, did we worry a lot.
We did worry. We worked out, one year we worried so much that we worked out a contingency plan because we didn't want to bankrupt every ethnic club in Tucson and leave them with piles of rotting food. So we worked out that we'd get the park for a couple of evenings after it stopped raining and work out a concert and sell food. But it never rained enough that we had to do more than shut things down for a couple of hours. The year of the flood, there was a little circle of clear sky right over the park. It was really remarkable.
And the park people, the city electricians, the city parks people, that year couldn't get into the park to set up the booths. Man, they knocked themselves out. When it finally quit raining 3 days before the festival, they did all the setup. And this was just typical of the kind of cooperation we got from the county, from the city, from everybody. You were saying that I was overloaded. There were times when I would altogether forget something really important. And I would go charging into the city offices. I can remember emailing Francie frequently, showing up for facilities and saying, I forgot to ask you for the... And somehow they would always make it happen for us. We had so much goodwill from volunteers, so much goodwill from town. And this is one of the amazing blessings of Tucson Meet Yourself, which goes on to this day.
That the floods of that was '83, I believe, and it was a 100-year flood. It was the city, and that 1 week before the festival, Campbell was a river, and Campbell and Glen was a lake, and we were all running around. Jim had it right. Everybody in town was very helpful, cooperative, afraid of exactly what was going to happen, that we were going to be rained out the week afterwards, and that all of this preparation and all the food and everything was going to go to waste. The city agreed to allow it to remain open afterwards, so that when the weather did clear, they would have more time to sell. We talked to the television and radio stations. They promised that if it needed it, they would advertise that the food was there and encourage people to come. The entire community helped out in that emergency. And, as Jim said, Friday, beautiful weather. 3 days, then rain again.
Well, you know what's interesting to me is that somehow who Jim is, not was, but who Jim is, was known way beyond where he might have imagined. And I remember a few years ago having coffee with Joel Valdez, and he was the city manager at the time. And they brought up the idea that there was going to be, they wanted to have this festival and so forth. And Joel said a lot of people advised him no because of legal and this and that and the other. And he said, he is a good man, that Dr. Griffith, make it happen. And you didn't argue with Joel Valdez then or now, you know. If he said Jim was a good man, make it happen, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Jim's a good man.
Yeah. He said, because I had asked him, what are you proudest of? He's had a bad stroke, Mr. Valdez. And I said, what are you proudest of, you know, your many years as city manager, because he's had a library named after him and all this. And he said, I made a little bit of a difference in Tucson Meet Yourself getting going.
Wow.
And that was pretty special.
All right, I think it's time to wrap up. We will have plenty of time out in the gallery. We have refreshments for you as well. So we're here till 8:30. You're welcome to stay and hang out with us and ask our panelists more questions. I do want to point out to you, if you didn't get a program, we do have programs up here. And there is another program on November 19th featuring Dr. Maribel Alvarez, who will speak on the topic 40 Years of Tucson Meet Yourself, Folklife and Culture. Let's give our panelists all a big hand, everybody.